Good morning, fellow sports and administration leadership students. I'm Debbie Blunt, and I will present a case brief for the National Collegiate Athletic Association versus the Board of Regents of the University of Oklahoma. The case as it's listed is a case which was argued before the United States Supreme Court on March 20th, 1984, and decided on June 27th, 1984. The premise of the original case was that the NCAA was in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, which was enacted in 1890 to oppose the monopolies or cartels that interfered with free and open trade. The National Collegiate Athletic Association was founded to regulate college athletics. In 1938, the first commercially televised broadcast of a college football game took place. The game was televised by the University of Pennsylvania, which later broadcast all of its home games. The NCAA was not happy about it, and it commissioned a study to determine the effects on game attendance for games which were not televised and for teams that were not televised. The study revealed that attendance did decrease for the games which were televised compared to the games which were not televised. The Football Television Committee of the NCAA deemed that there would be only one college game televised every Saturday, and no team could have a game televised more than once per season. The revenue would be shared by the teams that were playing and by the NCAA. Only one television network could hold the rights to broadcast the games, but that right was shared over the years with three different networks. That there were only three networks at the time. So essentially, the NCAA controlled everything about the televising of college football. Because of this, an organization called the College Football Association was formed, or the CFA. The organization consisted of all college football programs. In 1979, the CFA began to negotiate a television contract with NBC, while the NCAA was negotiating with the other two remaining networks, those being ABC and CBS. The NCAA learned about the CFA's negotiations and stated that NCAA schools who participated in the CFA contract would face sanctions not only for their football programs, but for all other sports. So two of the CFA schools, those being the University of Oklahoma and the University of Georgia, filed suit on September 8, 1981 in the United States District Court for the Western District of Oklahoma. They sought an injunction against the NCAA's actions against member schools. The first judge on the case recused himself because he was an alumni of the University of Oklahoma and of the University of Oklahoma School of Law. So a judge from New Mexico heard the case. The NCAA claimed that it was a voluntary organization and any institution which did not like their rules was free to leave. The judge thought otherwise. He pointed out that the NCAA did not allow individual institutions to negotiate their own television broadcast rights or television contracts, and the amount of money paid to the teams was set by the NCAA program director. So the judge ruled that those policies were a perfect example of price fixing and acted to limit production by restricting the number of games broadcast. He encouraged the NCAA to seek an exemption from antitrust laws from Congress, but the NCAA didn't believe that they would receive an exemption. The judge found that the NCAA had indeed violated the antitrust law, Sherman Antitrust Law, and issued a declaratory judgment and permanent injunction prohibiting the NCAA from interfering with individual universities who negotiated their own television broadcast deals. The NCAA then appealed the decision to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. In the appeal, the NCAA argued that the universities of Georgia and Oklahoma did not actually suffer any injury, but one of the judges rejected that argument and looked at the per se rule or rule of reason, and the court then rejected the NCAA argument that the athletic television plan promoted live attendance and promoted balanced athletic competition, and televised football competed with non-sports programs. The appeals court noted that the NCAA plan restricted output, and they affirmed the trial court's per se ruling. So after the original trial, the district court ruled that the controls exercised by the NCAA over televising college football games did violate the Sherman Act. So according to Justia, the district court defined the television market as live college football television because it found alternative programming has a significantly different and lesser audience appeal. The district court concluded that the NCAA controls over college football are those of a classic cartel with almost absolute control over the supply of college football, which is made available to networks and television advertisers. The district court found that competition in the market had been restrained in three ways. The NCAA fixed the price for particular telecasts. Number two, its exclusive network contracts were tantamount to a group boycott of potential competitors. And three, its own television broadcast deals. The NCAA then appealed the decision, like I previously mentioned, to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. In the appeal, the NCAA argued that the universities of Georgia and Oklahoma did not suffer any actual injury, but one of the judges rejected that argument and looked at the per se rule of reason. The court then rejected the NCAA argument that the television plan promoted live attendance and promoted balanced athletic competition, and televised football competed with other non-sports programs. The appeals court noted that the NCAA plan restricted output and affirmed the trial court's per se ruling, stating that the NCAA placed an artificial limit on the production of televised college football and constituted illegal price fixing. There can be no doubt that the challenged practices of the NCAA constitute a restraint of trade in the sense that they limit the members' freedom to negotiate and enter into their own television contracts. It is also undeniable that these practices share characteristics of restraints we have previously held unreasonable. According to the court, the NCAA attempted to use the example of broadcast music's license to market, but the court disagreed. Because there's no limit on the amount of product available and in the broadcast with the broadcast music group, and each individual of that group was still free to sell their own music without restraint. So the NCAA appealed again, and this time to the Supreme Court of the United States. And the Supreme Court granted, said they would hear the case, in which it would be settled with certainty. Because the case before the Supreme Court was the NCAA's appeal, the NCAA is the plaintiff, and the Board of Regents and the University of Oklahoma is the defendant. In the Supreme Court decision, Justice John Paul Stevens delivered the opinion of the majority. Justice Stevens stated there can be no doubt that the challenged practices of the NCAA constitute a restraint of trade, but he noted that not all restraints were unreasonable. Only unreasonable restraint was prohibited by the Sherman Antitrust Act. Stevens went on to say that although a governing body was necessary for sporting events and the rule of reason applied in the case, the NCAA had restrained price and output, which created a system that was unrelated to a free and competitive market. Since the NCAA television plan constituted a restraint of trade, it placed the burden on the NCAA to establish an affirmative defense which would justify the deviation from a free market. Justice Stevens wrote for the 7-2 majority that the NCAA plan creates a structure in which the market cannot be responsive to viewer demands in terms of price and output. Since the viewers of college football games can be defined as a distinct market, a plan that places the type of monopoly that places the NCAA in complete control of the broadcasts that reach its market creates a type of monopoly that the Sherman Act was meant to prevent. By limiting a number of live broadcasts, the court found that the NCAA was attempting to artificially increase the value of live tickets in the same way that a monopolist seeks to manipulate the market by limiting output. The television plan was struck down, and as a result of this decision, college football programming today is widely available, and universities are greatly benefiting financially from increased broadcast rights, and consumers are benefiting from increased options. According to a recent article in the Oklahoma Bar Journal, the Supreme Court's decision has been a prescription for the welfare of the consumer, those being fans of college football. Thanks.